but it's my honor and privilege to welcome Mr. JW Cortes to the stage. All right.
Thank you, and hello, Washington, D.C. Webster's definition says, an event or activity characterized by great length or concentrated effort. This is how a marathon is defined. Tomorrow, I believe that you may have a slightly different definition, perhaps with your own, let's say, descriptive choice of words, depending mostly on your finish time. Throughout the run, I imagine there will be many opportunities to take in the incredibly beautiful sights that will undoubtedly serve as reminders of our nation's rich history and storied past, and will help keep pace for you, see how far along you've trekked along this magnificent course. And we should take full advantage too. It's not every day we get to run widely on the streets of our nation's capital. But then again, these are pretty special streets. These are the same streets that for over 200 years have led our nation's leaders to their homes and to their offices, have offered hope to its visitors, and has stood fast as a symbol of our nation's promise to all who have come before, during, and after, that we are still land of the free because of our brave. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow visitors, runners, volunteers, everyone. My name is JW Cortes, and it is my honor to join you this evening. And now, if you will allow me, I would like to address the other humans in this room. Good evening, Marines! Thank you. Well, many may recognize me as Detective Alvarez from the hit TV series Gotham, and while I have worked on a number of other television and film productions, I can tell you without a blink of the eye, without a dramatic score to accompany my dialogue, that my greatest role to date has and will always be that of the United States Marine. Tomorrow morning, throughout the marathon course, there will also be hundreds, if not thousands, of cheering faces, the faces of those who will admire your bravery, your steadfast devotion to the mission at hand, and to assume what is probably true, your insatiable appetite for suffering. I'm so happy that one worked out. There's more. Their bright and colorful signs will also offer words of encouragement, and perhaps some whimsical piece of advice like, hey, Chuck Norris never ran a marathon. As you prepare to launch forward from that starting line, there may also be a moment where amongst the ocean of faces and signs, amongst the towering slabs of Aquia Creek sandstone and marble, will be a pair of connecting eyes. Set upon a young person's face, a face that will be neatly adorned with the uniform of the United States Marine. Perhaps that will be the moment that will serve as a reminder to you of a time in your own life, if not now, when you too believe, just as the spirit of the Marine has time and time again, that anything and everything you can possibly imagine is possible. Because isn't that what Marines are known for? Isn't that what makes this marathon particularly different from the hundreds of other marathons? The very name welcomes you to think about the Marine Corps, what it is and what it represents. And what is it? Is it that the Corps is an able group of people that believes when everyone else has given up, has accepted defeat, or has thrown out that old and worn piece of gear, that this group of believers will then take that gear, add some good old-fashioned elbow grease to it, and make it work, sometimes even better? Or that they are always preparing for anything and everything under the sun, And well, after everyone has called it a day, they find more need and more purpose to prepare even more. Or is it as simple as Semper does? Being always faithful that makes the Marine Corps so special. Well, I imagine that 42 years ago, when they were planning the first Marine Corps Marathon, they may have considered naming it something else, something a bit more runner-friendly. But they didn't. And I'm so glad they did not. Because I'm convinced, and I'm sure that you will agree, that running a marathon is a lot like preparing to go into battle. No, it's probably more like going into an endurance war, a war of mind and spirit. And no other institution on this earth wins more battles, prepares greatly for war better than the United States Marine Corps. So it is a great name for a marathon. Well, when I think back about my time in the Marine Corps, I almost immediately think about how much of what I have learned and experienced has and continues to serve me outside of the Corps. The lessons do not live only in our muscles, in our bones, in our scars and wounds, but they live and flourish in our spirits. It is what gives all Marines that connective tissue that we hold so close to our hearts. It is what we believe and what we rely on. It is that same spirit that lived in one of our very own heroes, Chesty Puller. Chesty, if you're here. It has been said that during the Battle of the Frozen Chosen Reservoir, one of our nation's most gruesome and bone-chilling battles, that it was at that moment that General Puller turned around to face his Marines and said, "They are in front of us, behind us, and we are flanked on both sides by an enemy that outnumbers us 29-1. They can't get away from us now." That is the winning spirit. You may not be physically surrounded by enemy forces, but we know that sometimes the most formidable enemy isn't outside of us, but it is inside. It lies quietly inside, patiently waiting to attack us when it believes that we are most vulnerable. But let me remind you that you have prepared to not only fight, not only to finish, but you have prepared to win and annihilate that enemy till it is no more. So as you have the conversations made up of the quieter kind, those that begin and end with you, during that time, I think you will have some pretty insightful questions. Perhaps some of those questions may sound something like this. What the heck were you thinking running 26.2 miles? Or, if you don't make it, say you were never notified about the race, blame it on your email being hacked by a rogue foreign nation. Or, I'd like to think that the questions might be a bit more rhetorical and reassuring. And instead, they sound something like this. One step at a time. Do not forget why and who you're running for. Or, what would that person, the one who just gave you the biggest smile of your run, who waves that flag so proudly, who sits and watches, what would that person give to be able to run? Or, these folks are Marines, you should have known better. Tomorrow, next week, next year, what will your story be? What would the older version of yourself say to you today? However you answer, I implore you to create answers that speak to the unlimited power of that warrior spirit inside of you. In addition to asking and answering those questions myself, it sparked the many images of the journey which has led me here tonight. Imagine, if you would, that it is March of 2003. The news outlets are feverishly relaying to everyone back home the newest images of the beginnings of the Iraq War. Despite having troops on the ground for some time now, you are now taking center stage to watch as the drama unfolds. From the reverse angle, I find myself, along with several thousand U.S. Marines, partaking in what is being referred to as the invasion of Iraq. For many of us, it was exactly what we had hoped for, what we had trained for, and what we believed we were destined for. You see, because for an infantry unit based out of New York, the events of 9/11 were still very fresh on our minds. We had learned that during that cowardly attack on civilian life, It had claimed the life of 26-year-old Sean Patrick Talon, a firefighter with the FDNY and a Marine corporal in our unit, a fellow brother. He was amongst the hundreds of other firefighters who had been killed, many who also wore the uniform of a United States Marine. Many of us, including myself, ran towards the towers that day to assist in the evacuation efforts, and we remained to assist in the recovery efforts as well. It was and will forever be deeply personal. Despite being in a combat zone with the Marines, it in fact wasn't the first time that I was in a zone of that kind. Growing up in Semper Park, Brooklyn, during the 1980s, during the height of the AIDS and crack epidemic, I lived on a block that the NYPD had nicknamed Little Vietnam. And that basically meant that on that particularly squarely designed piece of concrete and steel, I had already experienced gunfire, gang turf wars, death, and post-traumatic stress. I didn't know it then, but those experiences would prove useful in more ways than I could have ever reluctantly imagined. When everything around you seems bleak and impossible, you process these things in your mind as normal. Having a brother who would rise to the highest levels of the Latin King, one of the worst street gangs in New York City, was part of that normal upbringing for me. But when the streets grew quiet and my mind had time to drift away to another place, I found myself thinking of the most powerful question one can ask. What if? What if I could find a way out of this place? What if I could see more of the world outside of Brooklyn? What if I can go out there and do something that no one else can? The arts were a huge component of that equation for me. Asking what if is exactly what we did as young high schoolers who loved to act and sing. And we would sing on the long and sometimes treacherous subway rides home and wonder, what if some big music producer were on the train and wanted us to be the next big thing? What if that was our way out? It didn't happen quite that way. But the questions always remained, and the immediacy for change became ever so prevalent in 1993. As the situation continued to deteriorate around me, I needed to quickly figure things out. So I did what others feared to do, what others described to me as quote-unquote crazy. Which, thinking about it now, is a bit of a dichotic statement, considering the things that they were doing. So running faster, what felt faster than Dennis Kimetto's record-breaking marathon pace of 4:40 per mile, that's crazy fast. I ran into the recruiting office and joined the United States Marine Corps, an action that would prove to be the most critically important one day to my life. You see, shortly after I enlisted, my classmate was shot and killed just a few feet away from the entrance of my building, Michael Salcedo. A few months after that, that brother that I spoke of was indicted on some pretty serious charges and would be in prison for over a decade. So when I tell you that the Marine Corps saved my life, I mean every word of that statement. Critically acclaimed author Stephen Pressfield once wrote, "Habit will be your champion." When you train the mind to think one way and one way only, when you refuse to allow it to think in another, that will produce great strength in battle. I take it that's what makes the Marine Corps so special. It allowed someone like me the opportunity to accept the calling to become a part of something bigger than myself, and it created a habit to think the way champions think. And I trust that's exactly what happened when Taylor Winston, and what Taylor Winston was relying on the evening of October 2nd, when a coward began raining bullets into a crowd of hardworking Americans, good people who were there for a good time. Mr. Winston had been trained one way, and in a way that is synonymous with being a United States Marine. His actions are reflective of what happens every time that we deploy or return back home to our communities. We leave no one behind. We run towards the fire. We are better citizens, and we give of ourselves because we know no other way, because of habit. Mr. Winston himself transported nearly 30 victims during that heinous act of violence in Las Vegas. He returned over and over again, each time exposing himself to the vicious cycle of gunfire. And each time he loaded the back of the truck he borrowed with as many bodies as he could. You should note that the media said he stole that truck, but Marines don't steal. So I'll say it forward and you borrow that. Mr. Winston is a sergeant of Marines. Al Richmond, a Marine veteran, understands that same spirit as well. He has ran and completed 41 Marine Corps marathons, and this year he will run and complete his 42nd. He was asked recently if he had any plans on retiring his running sneakers, and his response was, "It is a habit. It is what I call a rite of fall." Mr. Richmond is 78 years young. You may think there's something different or maybe even alien to the genetic makeup of someone like Mr. Richmond or Mr. Winston or every other person running with you, but the truth is that there is nothing different. The commonality is our spirit. You too are brave. You too are stubborn. And you too understand the power in action. And if all of that isn't enough to drive you, on the course you will find a statue of Andrew Jackson by Lafayette Square. The statue was made from British cannons that were taken in the War of 1812. You can say, just like him, that you too are made of iron. So now I'll ask you a very simple question. Are you ready? When Gunnery Sergeant Cortes would ask that question of his Marines, they had simple instructions. If you understood the words coming out of my mouth, you would say check or hold. So I'll ask you one more time. Are you ready? Yeah. Try one more time. Are you ready? Yeah. Are you determined? Yeah. That's a lot of push-ups, people. You owe me a lot of push-ups. Instructions were, if you understand what I'm saying and asking, then the word is check. Do not, and it's hold. Are you ready? Yeah. Are you determined? Yeah. Outstanding. I will leave you with one last reminder courtesy of John Bingham, who can help summarize everything that I have attempted to say and convey to each and every one of you. And he said, the miracle isn't that I finished. The miracle is that I had the courage to start. Go forward with courage, runners. Embrace your warrior spirit, because beyond the shadow of a doubt, you are in fact ready. Good night, Semper Fidelis. God bless you. God bless America.